Greetings. This is Paul the Poke from PaulthePoke.com. Today's topic, I want to handle this topic with a tone of sensitivity. And this is not an area I've typically delved into, but I do think it's necessary at this time. I want to handle it respectfully and look at this from a biblical standpoint, see what the Bible has to say about it, see what Jesus has to say about it, and draw some conclusions to things happening in today's world in light of Afghanistan and the Taliban. The topic of self-defense. There are well over 100 verses in the Bible that support self-defense. I mean, so any argument, well, the Bible doesn't say anything about self-defense, or you don't have the right to do this or that, and that's not accurate. There's all kinds of verses about self-defense in the Bible that supports it. And we're going to look at some of the quotes from Jesus himself. And I mean, even if you look at some of the commandments, you shall not steal. It implies that property is yours. And the relationship between two people is that somebody should not steal stuff from you. Somebody should not threaten your life and try to murder you or kill you. And it implies that you have a right to defend your property and your livelihood. I mean, just at the very simple observation of it. But we've gotten into a situation in our culture. I don't know that we know that completely anymore. And so part of this is just kind of a review, and it's like, hey, let's just take another look at this. Let's see what the Bible has to say about it. And, again, over 100 verses. And I picked a few of them. Going to take a look at Luke 11, verse 21. When a strong man, fully armed, guards his own palace, his goods are safe. And that's a quote from Jesus. So, to break it down, in today's vernacular, the man in the verse above from Luke, he is physically mighty and powerful. He's well trained. He hits the gym regularly. He lifts weights. Probably does some sort of, self-defense training. he's loaded for bear. Has an array of weapons. He's got a gun chest or a gun safe full of weapons and ammo. He's ready to go. He protects his mansion. In the verse above, it's called a palace with the latest security equipment. Video cameras. I mean, he's holding court in his office. Got everything up on video cameras and screens. He can see what's going on the outside. Has a fancy house in a posh neighborhood. Nice place, nice neighborhood. And the fruits of his prosperity are well protected. So it's okay. I mean, Jesus uses this kind of guy as an example. And you don't find your security is not in all of that stuff, or your self-reliance or your strength. I mean, it's somebody wants to do something, they're going to do it, but it's okay to protect your things. And, you make the argument a strong deterrent may protect yourself, and somebody who wishes ill will go somewhere else. So there is something to be said for being fortified. Per Jesus. Take another quote of Christ's. Luke 22, verse 36. Jesus, he said to them, but now let the one who has a money bag take it, and likewise a knapsack. And let the one who has no sword sell his cloak and buy one. So go get a sword. He's getting ready to die, be buried and resurrected. And these apostles are getting ready to hit the trail and spread the good news of Christ. And Jesus is telling them, you're going to need to defend yourself. And you're going to need a sword. You need to go buy one. If you read a little bit further in the context of those verses, he took a quick inventory. They had 2 knives with them. He says, okay, that's plenty. I mean, that's the God of the universe. He didn't have any problem having a couple of guys with him having knives. Now, Yes, I know he could have had angels had the Father dispatch 12 legions of angels and take care of business. He could have done that. And he also could have said, hey, grab a knife, have a sword. He chose that too. That was Christ's choice to tell his apostles at that time. And he wasn't going to be around for the time he was talking about. And he knew that he was going to be at the right hand of the Father. And he told the apostles, be able to protect yourself, arm yourself, and if you need to sell some property to go to buy a weapon, then go do it. And Jesus was explaining a time would come they would need to defend themselves. So, that all of this needs to be kept in its proper perspective. Granted, we're not to go out and instigate or initiate violence with another human being. We're not supposed to go out and start stuff. We're not supposed to rely on our own strength or weaponry. You don't need to go around bragging about how much stuff you got. You're going to draw attention to yourself. And all those weapons aren't, and if you read further too, Jesus talks about that, somebody else stronger will come along and then you'll have a problem. And we need to have some discernment within the context of a lot of these things. And there is a difference between self-defense and murder. We don't need to go around taking other people's lives, spilling blood. Scripture frowns on that. You shall not murder. God makes it pretty clear, even in the context of murder, spilling another's blood. No, don't do that. That person's made in the image of God. God values human life in his image. So we need to be thoughtful. Defend yourself. Yes. Go start something. Go around being a bully and pistol whipping people or just beating up people. No. But you need to have some discernment, and you don't need to go around murdering people. Exodus 22 verses 2 and 3. If a thief is found breaking in and is struck so that he dies, there shall be no blood guilt for him. But if it happens in daylight, the one who killed the thief is guilty of murder. So clearly there's a division of action that takes place between day and night, because both of them are breaking and entering. And the Mosaic Law has provision for a crime committed at night in the dark. You can't see what's going on. Your vision's impaired. There is no light, and especially back in those days. And even if you think about it in our time, yes, we have lights and little night lights, but it's hard to see what's going on. Somebody wakes you up in the middle of the night and you're a little groggy. You don't know what's going to happen. It's not you wake up, deep sleep, trying to defend your family. Life's taken. Life's taken. The person who impairs, kills the intruder is not guilty. He's found not guilty. But if the crime takes place during the day, the light of the day allows one to see what's taken place. You have more facts at your disposal. You're able to see what's going on. You can make a better determination. And then if somebody breaks and enters into your house and they're killed during the day, the homeowner is guilty of murder. Now, if you look into the law, it also gives measure for what happens to the thief or the intruder. And usually they have to pay back what they stole. Essentially sold off as a slave, and they have to pay back twice of what they stole. So it's not, a thief is not somebody who, if found guilty, is murdered per the law. They have to pay things back essentially as a slave with work, or pay double what they steal, loosely. So again, discernment is the idea. Job 34 verse 4, let us choose what is right. Let us know among ourselves what is good. So make a determination, be smart. And that's easier said than done. The heat of the moment, somebody breaks into your house, adrenaline's going to be running pretty good. But the Bible calls us, as best as we can, one, defend your property, but keep your head. And there's a difference if it happens between daylight and darkness. You can just see better what's going on. And what the Bible says and what our local laws and state laws, federal laws say about breaking and entering and property is different, clearly different than what the Bible says. But the point of this is not to get into a discussion or a debate. Well, this is at odds with Michigan law or Florida law says, Texas law says, New York law says, and I don't care. Just taking a look at what the Bible has to say about the situation, what the law says, what Christ says, and, using our brains and thinking, discerning what's expected of us. And the last example I'm going to use is, there's a difference between somebody who wants to pick a fight versus someone who wants to kill you or take your property. Matthew 5, verse 39, again, this is Jesus. But I say to you, do not resist the one who is evil, but if anyone slaps, if you look at the Greek word, slaps, hit, on the right cheek, then turn to him the other also. It's like, look, somebody wants to start a fight. That's not worth shooting them over or not worth killing them or stabbing them or killing them. And again, keep your wits about you, keep your cool. That's not to say somebody doesn't deserve something, but Jesus is like, look, if somebody slaps you on the right cheek, let them hit you on the left one. I know some would argue, especially in areas I grew up, that person probably deserves a good old fashioned butt kicking. But Jesus said, so, but they don't need to be killed. And that's what's being called for us to do, is to use some discernment. Use your brain for the situation. Don't be a hothead. And again, way easier said than done. Way easier said than done. Heat of the moment. We can sit here with a good, clear conscience and say, well, I know what I would do. And we might know what we think we would do. And then something happens. And then you're pressed into action. Things happen quickly. May not see things accurately. And who knows what happens. But as best as we can, discern what is right. Be thoughtful, respectful toward another human being's life. And understand what's taking place. Does somebody really want to do harm to you and steal, take your property, exploit your property, versus somebody's just being a jerk? There's a difference, and we're called to understand the difference. Which leads us to Afghanistan. And I'm not going to turn this into an issue of what should have happened or how it should have ended, or U.S. response to this, or what the president should have said, should have done, what the previous president should have said, should have done. I mean, it is what it is. Plenty of blame to go around. This isn't the point and purpose of any of that. I'm going to take a look at 1 Samuel 13, verse 19. Now there was no blacksmith to be found throughout all the land of Israel, for the Philistines said, lest the Hebrews make themselves swords or spears. Now the context of these comments, it's King Saul. Now for whatever reason, King Saul didn't issue or want weapons issued to his populace. And I also understand, this was the time of Goliath. And Goliath, he was running the show in the land of the Philistines, and they were scared of him. And he had weaponry. He had swords. He was massive. I mean, it looked pretty hopeless to King Saul and the Israelis. And no blacksmiths were sneaking around making weapons or swords or spears. But the Philistines also understood, if If nobody's a blacksmith, they can't make weapons, and they're darn sure not gonna hurt us. I mean, so you think about that today. Somebody comes in. Well, if we stop making guns, we stop making ammo. There's nothing they can do to us. I mean, the Philistines understood take away the weapons keeps us safer. They had to feel pretty secure. You think about it. They had some giants, Philistines, Goliath and his family. They were giants. And he was armed to the tooth, had armor. I mean, they probably thought they were pretty invincible. Now, some young kid named David has another idea later. We'll talk a little bit about. I'll talk about that right now. David eventually, killed Goliath and became king, and arguably one of the most prosperous times of Israel's history under the leadership of King David. And they got over that idea of no swords and spears. They were a military power under David. So, again, now we can argue whether or not some of those wars were just. That's a whole nother discussion. But just the point being, you got weapons, you can defend yourself. And you should defend yourself. You don't need to go around again picking fights with people. But humanity, we like doing that. We like to, I'll go show so-and-so, or I want this that so-and-so has. And that gets back to coveting. One of the 10 commandments, you shall not covet. How many wars are started over coveting and wanting to steal something? Just at the simple core of it. Anyway, back to the Taliban. As a first order of business, the Taliban began taking weapons from the citizens of Afghanistan. And as they were marching into this place, into Afghanistan, this, by the way, is one of the leaders of the Taliban in the presidential palace. And they're making the proclamation, we understand people kept weapons for personal safety. They can now feel safe. We're not here to harm innocent civilians. And that's from a Taliban spokesperson. And let's just take a look here at this picture in the presidential palace. Now, if you blow this thing out wide, I just zeroed in on this leader of the Taliban. But look at this. This guy has his finger on the ready of a semi-automatic weapon. So does this guy. So does this guy. There's another one. I think there were like 6 or 7 guys all poised and ready to shoot, and they've got clips with all kinds of rounds. And these people with the weapons are telling you they're going to keep them safe, keep the citizens safe. They're not here to harm innocent civilians. And oh, by the way, we can have your weapons just in case. Now, they're not foolish. They're no different than the Philistines up there. Hey, if we take away the guns, and in the case of the Philistines, if we take away the swords and spears, we are reducing our risk from a rise up in the populace. And just think about it. How many times do we hear this nonsense? We're not here. You can feel safe now. We will protect your safety. I mean, that's not biblical. It's not up to the state. Jesus in the Bible makes it pretty clear to the point that it's up to the individual to provide their own safety. Now, corporately, as a government and as a nation, nations have the right to defend themselves too. And so I suppose that's what we're talking about in this sense. But, you had a group of people who, we can debate whether or not they were trained, if they were armed, if they were committed. That's not the point of this. In regards to Afghanistan. But what we do know now is that you have a population of people in Afghanistan, those that did have weapons are having their weapons taken away for their own, quote, personal safety. We're the Taliban and we're here to help you and protect you. Plenty of articles on the internet. Just type in Taliban gun confiscation Afghanistan, and there's just a pile of articles you can read on this topic. I picked Reuters, Taliban, Afghan capital, Kabul, start collecting weapons, civilians. Click on that. You can see a statement, brief statement. All kinds of articles, though. And the outflow of this. 1 Samuel 13, going back to the Israelis back in the day. Chapter 13, verse 22. So on the day of battle, there was neither sword nor spear found in the hand of any of the people with Saul and Jonathan, but Saul and Jonathan, his son, had them. So Saul was kind of looking to, cover his own backside as well. You could make that argument because none of the population was rising up in secret. He wasn't encouraging, doesn't appear. I don't know that, but none of the populace in Israel at the time had any weapons. Nobody was sitting there doing anything in their figuratively their basement, unlike parts of here in America or out in the country, making their own, building a better mousetrap, better gun. So at any rate, Saul and Jonathan were the only ones that had any kind of weaponry. And that's part of the reason why they couldn't handle the Philistines until, again, a young man had a little sling with some 5 rocks, took care of business. And that would all change under King David's leadership. But back to the Taliban, they're now running the country, and as a part of the, quote, spoils of war, or as they refer to this as the Khanimot, spoils of war Khanimot, is the term that's utilized in their language. The following headline was presented by the Daily Mail out of the United Kingdom. And this is what the article states: the rape of Afghanistan. Advancing Taliban go door to door and forcibly take girls as young as 12 to be sex slaves or wives for their fighters as they sweep across the country following NATO withdrawal. So that's what the Daily Mail put. Now, other sources indicate widows and divorced women under the age of 45 are suffering the same fate at the hands of the Taliban. So any single woman who doesn't have a husband under the age of 45, she could be taken for marriage for the warriors under the, quote, spoils of victory, if you will. And also, I saw this: women leaving the home without a male are subject to flogging. Private businesses and homes are being lost. So any private businesses owned by women, they're done. Any homes owned by women or apartments, that was something I was reading and just didn't understand it. So any woman who's renting an apartment, she will be kicked out of her apartment unless she has a male there with her to co-sign. Again, dailymail.co.uk, Taliban Murad streets, Kabul hunting girls young 12. Now the Taliban has responded via Twitter. Taliban spokesperson Suhail Shaheen, and I quote, all those claims that the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan forces people to marry the young girls to the Mujahideen are totally wrong. It is poisonous propaganda. So that is the official statement from, this is going to be called the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. That's just poisonous propaganda. Now, they say they're not going to do that, even though there are scores of articles all over the internet suggesting this is already taking place. The Taliban says, no, it's not. We're going to close with this, too. History is filled with brutal regimes and authoritarian dictators who disarm their populations. And the outcome is tragic with millions of dead souls. We know how this story ends. And you really have a lot of sadness and empathy for the people in Afghanistan, for what the future holds. And all the progress of education, women education, for the past 20 years. That's likely over. The idea of women participating in government leadership, I don't see that happening under the Taliban. They say it's going to. They've been talking to the UN. Yep, we're going to honor the rights of women. Okay, we'll see. A little suspicious, color me cynical. But just look at these things that have happened, and this just is from the early 20th century. I got five examples. 1911, Ottoman Empire, slaughter of Armenians. I think that was, oh gosh, like half to 2/3 of the population of the Armenians were taken out by the Ottoman Empire, modern day Turkey. 1929, Soviet Union under Stalin. He had no problem confiscating guns and then taking it out on the population. He also used food. He kept them from eating, starved out a whole bunch of farmers, and then they had a problem. Did you know that if you kill the farmers, that you will have a food problem eventually? Stalin learned that. 1938, Nazi Germany under Hitler. We know how that worked out. Lots of people, they confiscated weapons when he came into power. 1935, China under Mao. This was the largest of the population massacres. 65 million dead. And a lot of these, these dictator types, this was against their own people. Killed their own people. Take away their weapons, turn on them. 1956, Cambodia under Pol Pot. And then some estimate global deaths in the hundreds of millions. In the, 21st century. Examples of dictators, authoritarians, disarming their population and turning on their population. Now, there is an example where England's King George attempted to disarm some colonists in North America in the 1700s. He didn't disarm them, and we know how that worked out. So there was an example of a group of people who did keep their arms, had the right to bear arms, and some founding fathers who understood it was governments and dictators and authoritarians who populations need to be armed to protect themselves against. And so I'll close with this as a reminder to the peoples of other cultures and countries. It's okay and it's biblical to defend yourself, your family, and others. Jesus said. Psalm 82, verse 4, close with this verse: rescue the weak and the needy, deliver them from the hand of the wicked. Now, clearly, that verse, cultures, countries, governments have failed through the course of history to do that, to take care of the weak and the needy, and to deliver them from the hand of the wicked. Instead, it's the hand of the wicked that has gotten in control and suppressed these people and killed them off even more so. So, again, not a topic I typically get into. Most of this is prophetically driven, but I do think we're at a turning point. This is a big deal what we're watching. I'm gonna have some more thoughts on that later in the week. Appreciate you guys following along. If you like it, please feel free to share with others at PaulthePoke.com. And if you'd like to sign up, type your name in the email box and hit enter. And every time we put something out, you will be notified and you'll get an email telling you what's out. So appreciate it. Hope you all have a good one. Take care. Bye.